From iconic plantation homes harboring intriguing antiquities and all manner of associated ghostly activity, to full historic districts whose many weathered structures are roamed by the restless spirits of their former residents long since deceased. Are you sure you're ready to brave our third list of picks for some of the most haunted places in South Carolina? Number 5. The Kaminski House Museum. The Kaminski House Museum, located off of Front Street over the Stampit River out of Georgetown, South Carolina, is a historic abode turned educational venue that's recognized as one of the most well-renowned and true-to-form examples of Georgian-style homes of its era in existence. Historically, through the 18th century, land the House Museum now sits upon was owned by prominent South Carolinian merchant Paul Trapier, who, in 1769, would pass his estate to his daughter Elizabeth, and while it's believed the abode housing our museum existed at this point, this has proved hard to decipher through provided documentation. Eventually, the home and property would be passed to Elizabeth's niece, who would marry one John Keith, and whose family would maintain ownership until 1855, after which it was passed through a number of owners, until 1931, when it was acquired by Harold and Julia Kaminski, who, from 1946 to 1949, would perform a series of repairs and renovations aimed at modernizing the expanse and its amenities. Following Harold's passing in 1953 and upon Julia's death in 1972, the house and its grounds would be willed to the city to be immortalized in remembrance of the family. The Kaminski House Museum remains open into the present, offering tours, a range of annual events, a gift shop, and, as tale tells it, is tied to two chilling local legends. The first of said legends surrounds an 8-year-old boy whom it said resided at the house long ago with the homeowners while his parents traveled north for the summer. Sadly, it's told his parents were lost at sea and that the young boy fell ill with grief and eventually perished. His melancholy spirit has been spied roaming about, seemingly always watching the living from a distance. The second legend surrounding the Kaminski house tells of a young woman who lived there long ago and who fell deeply in love with a charming sea captain. Upon his return from a particularly lengthy voyage, this captain would present the young woman with a vial of potent exotic perfume as an intended gesture of his love. However, after he left the woman's home, to her horror, she watched from the upper window as he made his way to a tavern not far off, and later emerged with another woman under his arm. Distraught, it's told the young woman, acting with a broken heart, consumed the entire vial of perfume, resulting in her death shortly after. Her gorgeous, ghostly silhouette has been sighted up into recent times, often gazing from various windows of the museum, a mournful look on her face. Number 4. Magnolia Plantation and Gardens. Magnolia Plantation and Gardens, located off of Ashley River Road, just to the west of Ashley in South Carolina, is a historic abode holding the mantle of being one of the eldest plantation homes in the South, which is honored on the National Register of Historic Places. Historically, Magnolia's roots start in 1676, at which time a small house and formal gardens were established on site under Thomas and Anne Drayton, and later, in 1738, sadly, Drayton Hall would be constructed on the backs of those individuals enslaved under John Drayton on a nearby property. Through the American Revolution, both British and Continental troops would reside on the property for a time, while Drayton's sons would fight for the country. And through the 1840s, Reverend John Grimke Drayton would inherit the estate and would further develop its gardens. Through the Civil War, like many other plantations, the old abode was burned to the ground, likely by Union forces. And following the war, John would be forced to sell all but 390 acres in order to amass necessary funding for a full reconstruction and landscaping, which he would open to visitors by 1870. Astonishingly, the home and its lands remain under Drayton family ownership to this day, and more recently, in 2003, John Drayton Hasty would pass on, leaving the expanse under the care of a board of directors, which is comprised of his 2 children and 5 grandchildren. Magnolia Plantation remains open into the present, and while sections of the property are off limits to the public, a good portion of the weathered old estate can be viewed and visited. Rather classically, Magnolia is rumored to be haunted both by the souls of those enslaved across its bounds so long ago, and by the spirits of various owners, family members, friends, and employees who were connected to the house in lives since past, and those who frequent the expanse have reported ghostly scratching and knocking noises heard from within its walls, old-timey music that drifts on the winds, and disembodied growls and whispers that emanate from empty spaces. Additionally, an assortment of stories have arisen from those attempting to photograph or take video of the site, as upon developing their film or editing later on, shadowy figures, strange circles, and fogs commonly appear within frames with no plausible explanation. Lastly, some of the first of Drayton Hall's formerly enslaved would arrive through the 1670s from Barbados, and would battle heat stroke, disease, and dangerous wildlife such as alligators while working the plantation's fields, resulting in downright deadly conditions. Chillingly, what are believed to be the apparitions of said forced laborers have been spied wandering about the lands they once worked to form. Number 3. Poinsett Bridge. Poinsett Bridge, located off of Callahan Mountain Road and spanning Little Gap Creek within the Poinsett Bridge Heritage Preserve in Greenville County, South Carolina, is a crossing boasting the title of being the oldest bridge in the whole of the state, and perhaps even throughout the entirety of the southeastern U.S. Historically, construction of the bridge would conclude by 1820, and it would take its name after prominent Greenville local and U.S. Ambassador to Mexico Joel Roberts Poinsett, who was also credited with the introducing of the poinsettia flower to the States, which now bears his name. The crossing is suspected by historians to be the work of prominent Washington Monument architect Robert Mills, and sits as one of 3 stone bridges off of the old Saluda Mountain Road. The bridge and road would remain in use to through traffic until circa 1955, when, over the following year, the route was realigned to eliminate several dangerous turns by way of shifting the drive to the south of the old bridge. More recently, in 2003, the 122-acre heritage park surrounding the bridge was established in order to protect natural lands, and with its introduction, the expanse would welcome the forming and improvement of trails, the installation of viewing decks, and the addition of informal kiosks. This weathered crossing and park remain open into the present, offering a short hike, picnic sites, and plenty of picture-perfect settings. Over the area's lengthy usage, a range of local legends surrounding purported supernatural activity on site have formed, with some claiming phenomena a result of the many car accidents that transpired along the once moderately trafficked route, others of workers who died constructing the bridge and whose remains were supposedly buried under or even within its structure, and others still of tales stretching back to ancient times regarding sacred native lands or burial grounds that were disturbed when the plot was modernized and landscaped, and those braving the expanse have reported disembodied footsteps heard cutting through the brush, eerie, pale, ghostly figures that drift about after dark, and the unnerving feelings of being watched, followed, or even of being touched by a presence unseen. Some tales tell the old bridge is haunted by the restless soul of either someone who was enslaved or by the ghost of a criminal who was hanged from its edge long ago, while others of harrowing instances in which they are readying themselves to leave when they realize their vehicles won't start, after which they're approached slowly by a ghostly light that brings with it a blood-chilling scream, which grows louder as it nears. Lastly, several informal investigations of the area have yielded high EMF levels, chilling EVPs, and orbs in the backgrounds of photography, while others have documented voices and screams heard from the arch, or strange red, white, and green lights that flit about the mountainside, and are not dissimilar to old-timey lanterns in their glow and movement patterns. Number 2. The BullStreet District. The BullStreet District, located off of BullStreet in Columbia, South Carolina, is a 181-acre mixed-use site that formerly held one of the oldest mental institutions in the whole of the United States, the South Carolina State Hospital and its campus, and that, at the time of this upload being 2022, is still under redevelopment. Historically, in 1821, what was then called the South Carolina Lunatic Asylum was founded, with its first utilized complex, the Mills Building, being finished between 1822 and 1827 under prominent American architect Robert Mills, and from 1857 to 1885, the Babcock Building, which is now also contained on site, was constructed. In 1892, the asylum would open a nursing school, and in 1896, it would be re-established as the South Carolina State Hospital for the Insane. Through the early 20th century, persistent issues with funding, staffing, and declining patient conditions would result by 1920 in the state transitioning mental health care to community institutions and settings instead. And around the same time, the facility would reestablish itself as the South Carolina State Hospital. By the 1990s, the site would begin discharging patients, and in 2015, the Department of Mental Health would pull operations from site, following which, sadly, in 2018 and again in 2020, fires would decimate portions of the old Babcock building. In the present, the expanse remains under restoration by developers, who are slowly transforming its bounds into the BullStreet district mixed-use space, which will accommodate an assortment of residential, retail, dining, and recreational spaces. Chillingly, what started off as an effort towards the better understanding of mental illness would, in the darker and lesser funded years, take a turn for the worse, and stories of patient treatment would verge on nightmarish. One nurse actually sewed a patient's mouth closed after they cursed at her, while another woman was left in a straitjacket within a locked room for over 12 hours, resulting in her panic-induced demise. And it's believed this turbulent past has resulted in a slew of paranormal activity across the property, with those braving its bounds reporting extreme cold spots on hot days, inexplicable battery death in personal electronics, and encounters with ghostly doctors and nurses in old-timey garb who are usually spied hurrying around corners or straight through solid walls. A large number of patients were cycled through the living quarters at the Babcock building until around 1991, and current restorations aim to have the space renovated into a 208 one- and two-bedroom apartment complex, which is set to receive applications this year in 2022. Chillingly, future tenants may be in for more than they bargained for, as local tales paint this space as the most active on site, with those venturing inside telling of phantom screams and shrieks heard emanating from thin air, of encounters with ominous shadowy figures that chase the living, and of run-ins with the manic, deranged, malnourished, and ghoulish-looking specters of former patients, whose behavior can get threatening at times. Number 1. The St. Helena Parish Chapel of Ease Ruins. The St. Helena Parish Chapel of Ease ruins, located off of Lands East Road out of Frogmore and on St. Helena Island in South Carolina, is a historic site harboring the remnants of a prominent former place of worship, whose ruins were honored on the National Register of Historic Places in 1988, and that are rumored to hold some of the state's most active supernatural phenomena. Historically, in 1740, this now weathered Anglican church was constructed under local planters as a chapel for the ease of those residing on the island, and whom found it difficult to continually travel back and forth to Beaufort for worship. And by 1812, the island's populace had grown to a point that the humble chapel was elevated to parish church status. Amidst looming pressures from the Civil War, in fall of 1861, a good majority of planters would leave the island. Through the federal occupation of St. Helena, the old church site would be utilized by Northerners, who occupied the structure as a place to educate and train freedmen. By 1868, the sanctuary was used by Methodist freedmen, and sadly, the structure would be damaged beyond repair in a fire in February of 1886, and would never be repaired. The St. Helena Parish Chapel of Ease ruins remain open to adventurers into the present, boasting a small connected cemetery, and acting as a popular and scenic wedding venue for those members of the parish wishing to be joined right amongst the histories of their very own faith. Over the years, a slew of supernaturally charged legends surrounding this weathered chapel site have surfaced, with activity a suspected result of all those who were connected to it in lives since past, and those who have braved its bounds have reported extreme cold spots in the heat of summer, random bouts of nausea that dissipate only upon vacating the area, disembodied whispers, prayers, and singing heard from the interior of the chapel, and encounters with apparitions in clothing spanning the ages. Additionally, those who have ventured through the cemetery have told of strange tingles and chills felt at random, of sightings of a spectral lady in white with a child in her arms that drifts or walks amongst the headstones, and of names heard that are seemingly called out from surrounding forestation. One more popular story surrounding the old burying grounds intertwines with history to tell of the Egyptian revival-style Fripp Mausoleum, which was constructed under Edgar Fripp and his wife in 1852. The prominent couple was laid to rest on site with some of their most valuable possessions. However, when Union soldiers caught wind of this, they would permanently destroy the tomb's door and would rob the resting place bare. As this tale tells it, associated soldiers would then reseal the tomb, but when they returned the next day, all of their work had been undone, and the bricks they'd reset, dismantled, and laid into neat stacks nearby. Though the soldiers would try to reseal the vault again, and once more after that, they would always return to find their work undone, and would end up leaving the mausoleum wide open, which is exactly how one can find it to this day. Taking its fascinating history and slew of associated witness accounts and purported paranormal phenomena into consideration, we felt the St. Helena Parish Chapel of Ease ruins was a solid choice as this list's most haunted place in South Carolina. Thanks for tuning in for our third list of picks of some of the most haunted places in South Carolina. If you enjoyed our histories and ghost stories, subscribe to our channel, like this upload, and share us with anyone you feel could use a good scare. Good night.